All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the first live stream of the Hot Mic podcast. Hot Mic is a podcast where divergent points of view debate and discuss the hot issues of today. I'm Nathan Ivy, your humble host, and I am not alone. I am not alone. Today we'll be discussing and giving reaction to the debate last night, the first presidential debate between candidate Donald Trump and the incumbent vice president, now the presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, Kamala Harris. I want to introduce our esteemed hot micers. We got Kevin Aldrich with the Cincinnati Enquirer. He's the opinion editor. We've got Ironetta Wright. She's a CEO of Right Way Leadership Group. We've got Mac Mariani, and we've got Phil Heimlich. Everybody, welcome.
Glad to be
Welcome.
here.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm glad you're not lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump straight into it, shall we? So last night we had the big debate between the two candidates, and it was a thing. Let me make a bold statement here. A lot of people are saying that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump both didn't answer questions, and that's true. There were times when they both dodged the questions artfully, one more artfully than the other. But in general, I think that the main question was answered, which is which of these two individuals is ready to lead, who is ready to be commander in chief. And in my humble opinion, that is obviously Kamala Harris, without a doubt, 100%. Quite honestly, as I was watching the debate last night, I wondered exactly what we were going to talk about because I think the conclusion about who won, and not just who won the debate, but who is better fit as a candidate, as a human being to lead this country, is without a doubt that is Kamala Harris, hands down. I want to know what you think. Ironetta, coming to you first. What do you think?
I could not agree with you more. I think last night, as I watched the debate, I grew up in a household where every time there was a presidential debate, every time the president was coming on to give the State of the Union address, it was a thing in my house. My grandfather, who was born in 1918, was big on voting and insisted that we always paid attention. And last night took me back to thinking about all of the other debates that I've seen and working with and looking at all of the other leaders that I have seen. And it gave me a sense of calm because the first time in a long time, when we start thinking about the former president and where he has been right now, looking at Kamala Harris, you were able to see a leader that exhibited acumen, a leader that not only spoke with conviction, but also was very confident and showed the level of control that is necessary to be the commander in chief. And so I walked away from that feeling hope as we think about where we go next in terms of the presidential election.
Anybody else, gentlemen? Somebody want to jump in there?
Well, I'll jump in. I want to announce that I'm going to be making a trip up to Springfield, Ohio to defend the pets of that community. Okay. That's the first thing. The other, I'll tell you another thought. Even if you go back to the Nixon Kennedy, and I'm dating myself here, but I've heard political strategists say if you want to know who won a debate, turn the sound off and just look at the visuals. Okay, which is why in 1960, the people who just listened said Nixon won, the people watched and said Kennedy won. I mean, the contrast just in the visuals. Okay, both not just that, frankly, she's an attractive woman. Forgive me for sounding chauvinistic. She's got that big smile. She showed humor. I think what was very telling was the difference in their expressions when the other was speaking. She had this I'm sure she practiced it. She had this look on her face, kind of like I'm looking at right now. Like, are you kidding me, buddy? And Trump, of course, was just an old man scowling. Okay. The other thing that I think is important in this, they say that what's most important about these debates isn't necessarily what you see watching, but what the pundits and all the media say after. And I mean, other than that last Biden debate, I've never seen a wider range of media say that she crushed the guy. Even Fox News, I looked at a bunch of clips from Fox. Those guys all said he basically lost. So anyway, those are my immediate impressions.
Nathan, I'm going to give a slightly different take, maybe than what Ironetta, the more diplomatic answers that Ironetta and Phil gave for the debate. Here's what because I think we're having the wrong conversations here today. It's not a question of who won the debate. I don't think anybody who watched that objectively knows Kamala Harris won that debate. But the conversation we're having this morning is the wrong conversation. And I've watched a lot of media. I've seen a lot of conversations in social media circles. And, folks are treating this as if this was a normal debate. And they're asking questions like, did Kamala Harris do enough? That's not the question that we should be asking ourselves this morning. The question we should be asking ourselves this morning is, what's wrong with that other guy who was standing across from her? I mean, just imagine if this just goes to show how Donald Trump has normalized bad behavior, unacceptable, inappropriate behavior. Just go back 10, 15, 20 years ago and imagine a presidential debate. Imagine Ronald Reagan or imagine Barack Obama talking about immigrants eating pets, talking about babies born after the 9th month being executed, failing to take any culpability or denounce an attack on the Capitol, using a dictator, citing a dictator and a strongman as a reference for your ability to lead the country. Just go back and think about if Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama had given the type of debate performance that Donald Trump had given, they would be disqualified. We wouldn't even be talking about them this morning. We would be talking about how nuts they are. But this is how low Donald Trump has lowered the bar in terms of what's acceptable. If Donald Trump even appears normal, he had a successful debate. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has to dot every I and cross every T, and we're still asking, did she do enough? The question that we should be asking is not did she do enough? The question that Americans should be asking themselves this morning is, have we had enough? Have we had enough of this sideshow of Donald Trump? And are we done accepting this sort of thing? What made me, at first it made me angry, and then it made me sad. That said that there are people in this country who are so afraid that they're willing to put their decency on the shelf and even consider this man for another opportunity. So for me, I think we're having the wrong conversation. It's not about who won. It's not about did Kamala Harris do enough. The question that Americans should be asking ourselves is, have we had enough of this guy? And, that's kind of where I'm at after watching it.
Fair point.
Kevin, we got to start somewhere, though. We got to start somewhere, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get there. But fair point. Mac, it's on you.
Yeah. So, I think I've long said that I think Trump is less a cause of our problems than a symptom. And I think one of the reasons why, I think Hillary Clinton saw this, and you certainly saw the Republican candidates in the last two, or in 2016 and 2024 in the primary suffer from this as well. And, one of the challenges is the establishment of both parties, Republicans and Democrats, have not come to terms with the fact that there's a reason the voters have turned to Trump. And the reason is that they don't trust the establishment. The establishment has not delivered for them and has not prioritized the things that they prioritize. And Trump, I think Trump had a terrible debate. I think it was, and there's no question. I mean, I think that there's sort of, the moment, which is the immediate perceptions, was, I think, disastrous for him. Disastrous, probably overstating it, but it was not a great night for him for sure. The key thing is the narrative. To what extent does this reset the narrative in a way that benefits Harris? I think that's left to be seen. Each of the candidates had a chance to reset that narrative with their respective conventions. And, I don't think either of those conventions did much to really change the dynamic of everything. But and the question always becomes, at the end of the day, it's about votes, right? And votes are not only about personalities and the character of the individuals. It's also about policies. And the challenge that I think Harris is going to face and I think she ran very effectively as a challenger. The sitting vice president ran very effectively as a challenger and put Trump on the defensive, and Trump was unfocused and undisciplined. And I think that was to Harris's credit. She had a very, very good debate. But ultimately, this is about policies as well as personalities. And
if I can, I'm sorry, go ahead, Meg. I was going to jump on Kevin's point.
If you look at what the American people are saying overwhelmingly about the direction of this country, about the policies that have been in place, about the state of the economy, the ratings for the president and the current vice president Harris are disastrous. They're terrible, and the reason is there's a disconnect between what the establishment seems to value and prioritize and what the American people seem to value and prioritize. And Trump has filled that void. Now, whether he's the right answer, that's another question. But until the establishment comes to grip with the fact that the problem lies within and not with Trump and starts to change what they do, we're gonna get it's Trump's all the way down, everybody. Trump's all the way down. There'll be another Trump after him until the establishment figures it out and starts to address the real problems that people are facing, and they are suffering.
Well, jumping down real quick, Kevin's point about normalization, how Trump has normalized racist, anti-Semitic, just in cruelty, frankly. Why is that? And I know we're off on a bit of a tangent here. I would say it's frankly because of the cowardly politicians in my party, the Republican Party. You know, it's the old saying about Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And my party is full of so-called good men, whether it's the Rob Portmans of the world, I don't know if I'd ever call Lindsey Graham a good man, but whatever, the whole group of them, very few other than Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, they're all frankly cowards. They refuse to speak up and do what's right. And I believe that is why that has contributed to that normalization that Kevin referred to.
Well, quite frankly,
if I could just follow up on that, because Mac, and I have a lot of respect for Mac's analysis and everything, and I don't disagree with what he said about where some Americans are, and one of the things that I've heard, and Mac used this phrase, policy and personality or over personality. I can't remember which Max said, but here's the thing. I'm sure we'll have in this conversation a discussion about policy, which I heard nothing on that front from Donald Trump in terms of, at least Kamala Harris offered some policies. At least she tried to put a little meat on the bone when ducking questions, his major platform of mass deportation. He was asked specifically how that would work. I don't know if you noticed like I did, but he didn't answer that question at all. He talked about having concepts of plans. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris if that had been the answer to her question on the economy? I've got concepts of plans. And this is on an issue that this guy has been running on for 9 years, right? We're talking about healthcare, and he's just got concepts of plans. Come on, get out of here. This whole policy and personality thing, again, is something that I hear. And people are like, well, I care more about policy than personality. And what I always say is it's not personality, it's character, right? There's a difference between personality and character. I cannot like your personality. I cannot like how you come off. But character is a different thing altogether. And Donald Trump lacks it in spades. He lies. How can you trust the policies of a guy who lies at the clip that he does? How can you trust that he'll deliver on anything that he says? So that's the problem that I have with supporters of his who are like, well, I like his policies. Well, how can you trust a guy who will say anything? How can you trust a guy who will get up in a debate in front of a national audience and say something that he knows is knowingly false about immigrants eating pets and about babies being executed at 9 months? How do you trust that individual and their policies? So it's not personality. We need to stop saying that it's not personality, it's character. And if you've got bad character, how can you trust that a guy is going to deliver on policy?
We also need to stop saying.
Hold
on for a second, Phil. We also need to stop saying that Trump had a bad night. No, this is Trump every night. He just got exposed by his opponent last night. I saw nothing different last night than what we saw against Biden. Same thing. I personally thought that Biden won because he told less lies and tried to be truthful. Sure, he was a little bit slower with his speech, but at least his character seemed a bit more intact than what we got with Trump. Trump ran into a buzzsaw last night, and he wasn't prepared. And as I watched it, quite honestly, the man doesn't even deserve to be on the same stage as her, quite honestly, in any way, shape, or form. So when people talk about policy, what that is they're trying to misdirect from the train wreck that we just saw last night. The man is a habitual liar. He's got when COVID happened, he left us all dry because he was too consumed with how it might make him look. this love affair, which she called him out. It was just body blow after body blow, and it was just facts. It was just facts. But go ahead, Phil.
Well, I was going to say, Mac raised the point of, well, maybe the reason Trump has been successful to some degree is because the people of this country are disgusted with the establishment and so forth. And I think there is some truth there.
Yeah,
You know,
he's
I
right.
wouldn't, maybe I'm taking an extreme time in history, but, you know, you go back to the 1930s. Okay, well, were the German people anti-Semitic, or did you have a cruel and horror and brutal dictator who brought that out or appealed to that side? And, you know, maybe it's some of both, but there's no question that Trump has pointed and poked at those divisions. And I think Vice President Harris did a good job of constantly saying last night, hey, let's not go back to somebody promoting divisions, because let's face it, if you want to promote divisions, there's a lot of divisions to promote. But if you want to try to bring people together, as she did, I think that's certainly much more noble.
I think the one thing that gives me pause as I think about, and I agree with much of what I've heard during our opening, but one of the things that gives me pause is, and I've shared this earlier, you know, the Trump supporters are his steadfast supporters, regardless to what he says, what he does, how he does it, they support him. My concern right now, as we think about what we saw last night, are not those that are going to support him regardless to what he does, but it's those that are in the middle that that were undecided going into the debate, where they sit right now, and whether or not they are still undecided. I don't know how you can see that kind of activity and still be undecided, but the ones that are the supporters, they're going to support. I mean, listen, they've supported this guy through the insurrection, something I never thought I would ever imagine seeing in my lifetime. And so, you know, to your point, Phil, individuals that I thought, when we think about them, at least they had some level of decency when it came to what needs to happen for the public. We see that that's no longer the case. So my concern at this point is, did we truly reach, and did our vice president truly reach those that are in the middle, that were undecided, because they could see that this is the person that needs to move forward as the leader of our country?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably one thing that I would say coming out of this debate that Kamala Harris has to do. Kamala Harris did not win the election last night. This debate is not going to decide the election. I do agree with Mac that even with the poor performance that was there last night, this probably doesn't do much to move the needle. And you might be saying, well, how is that the case? I think what you've got is those who are out there who are somewhat undecided are probably more in the category of your less engaged, low information voters. They're not folks who are following this stuff each and every day, and so they're trying to figure out, you know, who to go with. And these are not people who are going to do a ton of research on their own or go to websites or things of that nature. They rely on interviews by the media and things of that nature, things that are shared on social media, to get their information. So Kamala Harris opened the door, I think, last night to folks who are turned off by Trump, but still don't know enough about her. And she's going to have to redouble her efforts to do more media interviews, to answer more questions. You know, look, Donald Trump's a celebrity, like it or not. He's got a name recognition and a track record that a lot of times when people hear that name, sometimes that will be enough. Kamala Harris, even though she's been vice president, is still, and as hard as it may be to believe for some people, is still an unknown commodity who people have questions about. And over these next 8 weeks or however many it is we have before the election, she's got to work overtime to be out there and answer the questions that folks still have about her. And I think that that if she can do that effectively, I think she will be the next president of the United States. But she's going to have to get to those voters who are still on the fence, every one of them that she can get, and let them know who she is and what she stands for, and do a much better job of more directly answering the question, particularly the one about, are you better off than you were 4 years ago, which we'll get into this later. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I do have an answer that she could give that I don't understand why she doesn't give it. but it's certainly an answer that she should give that I think many Americans would accept.
Well,
and I think, jump in there.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, Kevin pointed this out. I think this is right. Like, we're watching this and we're watching it from certain, looking for certain things. And a truly undecided voter is or a low information voter is watching these kind of discussions and the debates for something very different. And I think for Harris, I think the challenge for her is to answer that question: what's going to be different? Right? She has to make the case for the idea that that the policies that have been implemented are going to work. We're going to work differently now, and now we've got this foundation, and it's going to build forward. Or I'm going to deviate from them in some ways that is going to be meaningful, and that we can expect a different outcome. Because that's fundamentally what it comes down to. At the end of the day, people could like Trump or dislike Trump or hate Trump. And if they feel like their life is not going to be better 4 years from now under Harris, that's going to be a much tougher sell. And so I think that's the key thing that they're looking for. Trump is Trump. He's doing his thing, right? Like, we're watching them being like, oh my God, how terrible Trump is. It almost doesn't matter. He could be there or not there. For the undecided voter, she's got to make the case. And so far, I think the campaign strategy has been, listen, I'm going to try to keep under the radar as much as possible and let this race be about Trump. But I think at the end of the day, that's not going to be possible. I think people need to know what those policies are, how they're going to be implemented, and how they're going to be different. I think that's the challenge for her. And that we'll see. Maybe being not Trump is enough. It certainly worked for the most part for Biden in 2020, but it wasn't enough in 2016. So it's a gamble if you think it's going to be, if you want to go that way.
Well, a couple of you have brought up the question. Okay, why are people still supporting this guy given the stuff he said and so forth? And what I'm thinking about is Kevin and others were talking is I look at my circle of friends. Okay. And I would say, honestly, probably in my circle of friends, 80 to 85% are what I'd call white evangelicals. I mean, that's what they are. Okay. And, when I ran actually in a Republican primary for Congress as an anti-MAGA candidate, truthfully, most of them, they didn't confront me, but I knew they weren't supporting me. Okay. And I'm asking the question, okay, why is that? Well, the way I look at it, I think there are some, frankly, out there that literally have this hatred toward the Democrat Party. Okay. And I think that is just a fact. I've just seen it in people's reactions, and including uninformed, maybe particularly uninformed ones, but both. And I also think, especially now I'm talking about the evangelical crowd, which regretfully, by and large, supports Trump by a wide margin. I'm telling you something. What I have observed is that if somebody is pro-life, that is so important that they will overlook the most corrupt, indecent, adulterous, dishonest candidate, okay, just because of that issue. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's what I would say is the case.
Well, I think we have to look at the very real reality of this. Look, if you are a Republican, you see the strategies for improving America and moving it in a direction very differently than liberal Democrats do. And I think there are some Republicans who see, for as bad and distasteful as Donald Trump is, they see Democratic policies as more destructive to America than Donald Trump. And so they will hold their nose and vote for a guy that they may not like or that they think is distasteful because they're more concerned about what Democratic control will mean for them and their children in the future in this country. I to a certain degree, I can kind of understand that. Here's where I think the breakdown comes in, is that there were a host of other conservative candidates that the Republican Party could have chosen to carry that flag or banner, who would have stood up for the same policies and issues that Donald Trump stands for. And maybe it's like Max said, maybe they just want somebody who's outside of the establishment. And if Trump can even be considered, I don't know how you can be president for 4 years and then suddenly not be a part of the establishment. I don't know how that happens, how you make that math to a certain extent. But many other standard bearers that the Republican Party could have chosen. And the fact that we wind up with this guy has left people with this binary choice. And I think that's what we're looking at on both sides is we don't have a viable third candidate or somebody else for either side that we can bring in. Because let's face it,
we never will.
If the Democrats actually had a full primary in which, there was a slate of candidates that ran through, I even have my doubts if Kamala Harris would have emerged as the selection of the Democrats to be president. She may have. I'm not saying she wouldn't have. I'm just saying that if we had gone through a full Democratic standard primary process, there's the chance that even she might not have been the selection that the Democratic Party would have taken to represent them in the run for the White House.
What's your point
we have
with that,
who we have, and when it's a binary choice, I think people are gonna, unfortunately, side with the side that they think is going to represent their interests.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I hate when I hear people say that because these are the choices that we have. It is.
I agree.
Right? I also, there's a part of me that feels like there really are no undecided voters. Like, what more do you need to see? What more does she need to say? Like, I've heard you guys say, and I think you're right. She needs to make the case and talk about how she's different from Biden. But even when she does it, will people hear it? Will they accept it? Will it really penetrate? I have my doubts about that. And these independent voters, I don't know these people. I don't know what the real deal is with them. I don't know if anybody really is independent or undecided, should I say, undecided voters at this point. How could you be? Are you really going to vote in the election? Like, what do you need to see? Do you need God to come down?
Well, they're low information. That's the thing. They're low information.
What else do you need to see?
I think they need to see genuineness, Nathan. I think they need to see sincerity. I listen to some of the people who. I think I listened to some of the people who were talking in the focus groups afterwards. And they were polling people. They could react as the candidates were talking, and they were talking to some of the folks afterwards about, hey, what is it that made you respond to this? And I think it's the same thing that appeals to some people about Trump. Trump is, for better or worse, whatever you think, he's unvarnished. He speaks his mind. He's not a polished politician who's got talking points and things of that nature. He just speaks off the cuff. And I think what the American people are looking for is a passion and a reason to believe that this person is in it for them. And I think some of Kamala Harris's strongest points last night, particularly when she was talking about the abortion situation and other things, you could see it in her delivery and how she talked, that it meant something to her, that it was important to her, and that resonated with people who were in the room. Right. So I think what Kamala Harris has to do is not just have the talking points, you got to have that, but I think she has to come across with sincerity. The way I would answer the question about, well, why didn't you do something the last 3.5 years? Because I'm not president, right? Joe Biden was the president. I was the second in charge. Like, anybody who's ever been second in charge at anywhere knows you go along with what the boss has. Maybe you agree with some of the things, but nobody ever agrees with their boss 100%. And we all sit back and say, if I had a chance to be in charge, I would do things a little bit differently. Right. Yeah, I got to go along because this is the boss. This is the guy who's paying my paycheck right now. This is the person who hired me. So I got to go along with what they say. But give me a chance to be at the top of the ticket. I'm going to do some things the same as he did or she did, but I'm going to do some things differently. I think that's the kind of honesty. That's how you answer that question. I
think what the American people are also not seeing is we are watching dictatorship unfold in front of our very eyes. Like, we are seeing it happen. When we think about things that have happened across the world and you wonder how wonderful people or people that were good people end up in the situations they've ended up in, it is because of what we're seeing right now happening in our country, where you have an individual that is mesmerized by dictatorship. You have policies that are being enacted by individuals that he has put in office that are rolling back the parameters that we have as a part of our Constitution. He is single-handedly, with the support of individuals that have been lifelong politicians, he is really single-handedly poking holes in everything about our democracy, and we are watching it happen. And so if that doesn't become enough, I really don't know what is, because he's showing us all of the signs right now that this is the direction that we're going. Essentially, for the highest court in the land to say this guy can do whatever it is that he wants to do, and he will be immune to it. He will not have any repercussions from that. Of course, he's not going to take responsibility for anything he does. He couldn't take responsibility last night. He could not. Every single person that has done anything, hopefully there is something for them to learn from it. Last night, he could not take responsibility for what he actually, for his part, in even something as heinous as January 6th. And so when we think about it, we see dictatorship. It's unfolding in front of our eyes. If that's not enough, I don't know what enough is.
Well, Kevin, I just want to, if I could, I'll respectfully disagree with your suggested response that you say she should have made about, are you better off 4 years later? And the thing, I have a pretty smart, well-known political consultant who always used to say, Bill, you don't have to answer the question that the media asks you. You don't have to, okay? You don't. And I think, I know that sounds very cold and very self-serving, whatever, but the truth is she did a great job at that last night. I mean, there were a number of questions, frankly, she did not answer. And I sat there and said, way to go, okay? Because the goal is to win. It's not to be Mr. Forthright. And I think if she starts trying to explain why you're actually better off now, that's a tough one. I'll just say I give her and her handlers a lot of credit for, frankly, not answering questions when she could have.
Well, hey, Phil, real quick, I think you're hitting your microphone. Right? Hey, hold on a second, Mac. Phil, I think you're hitting your microphone on your desk, and it's really audio standpoint very unpleasant. Just kind of watch.
I mean, I think this gets to the problem that Harris faces, the fundamental challenge, right? Because the reason she can't directly answer the question, are you better off 4 years ago, is the answer is no. And that's a problem. And that's a challenge for her. And she's got to figure out how she can answer that in a way that is satisfying to voters. I wanted to bring back kind of reacting a little bit to what Kevin said about the discontent. And I think that the discontent, one of the things to remember is you look back to 2016 and 2020, Sanders ran very, very strong primary races for the Democratic presidential nomination. There is a tremendous amount of discontent in the Democratic Party. And if were it not for the fact that the party coalesced behind Biden, where you had all the major, all the other major candidates dropping out, they were with a lot of pressure from Obama and from the Clintons to be like, hey, listen, we're going to lose this race if we don't consolidate now, because Sanders will end up being the nominee. So there's a lot of discontent out there. We didn't see it this time because there was an incumbent president and we didn't have an actual primary. But we're in the middle of something that feels, political scientists are always seeing realignments everywhere, but feels like we're in this grinding realignment. It's happening very slowly. I mean, you could see it on the Republican side, now you've had Tulsi and RFK, both people who wanted to run for president on the Democratic side, who are now aligned with Trump. And you got the Cheneys and possibly the Romneys and many other Republicans on that side. It feels like, we're starting to see those. We're still kind of locked into thinking about parties like they were in 1984 and 1988. And, the parties are nothing, are not like that. To some extent, we do have a third party candidate. It was Trump. He took over the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is still coming to grips with it. And what does the Trump party look like? That's, he's sort of an unconventional figure. And what happens afterwards, I think, is going to determine to some extent what this realignment looks like. But I don't think politics goes back. We're not going to go back to the days of the Bushes on the Republican side and the Romneys. That's over. That's over. Really? And so we're going to be looking at something very different, where the Cheneys and the Romneys and the Bushes are aligned with the Obamas. That's going to be very different.
Well, I think because you see a lot of changes in the demographics and the cultural nature. I think a lot of the discontent, or however you phrase it in terms of the Democratic Party, exists because the Democratic Party is a big tent party. There are a lot of constituencies within the Democratic Party that you have to reach, a lot of minority groups, a lot of gender divergence and sexual orientation divergence. Not saying that that doesn't exist in the Republican Party, but it doesn't exist to the degree that it does in the Democratic Party. I mean, look, let's face it, the Republican Party is mostly white Americans, straight white Americans. Not saying that there aren't tabs of diversity within there, but I think we know that that party is largely a white party. That means less diversity. That means more homogeneity, and so I think that makes for less opportunities for conflict. Whereas when you have a party where you have Arab Americans and Jews who are part of your party and they're in conflict, yeah, naturally you're going to have to, and they're both members of your party, you're going to have a hard time threading that needle within that party to try to deal with those issues with your constituents. The Republicans don't have to really worry about that because they've kind of made the decision, especially under Trump, that, you know what, we don't need that. We can go out and win with our base, or try to win with our base, and rely on the Electoral College. The fact that a Republican hasn't won the popular vote in how many elections is evidence of the fact that they're not on the side of the majority of Americans on issues. They're the beneficiaries of an Electoral College system that allows them to stand a chance.
Let me move on here. I want to talk about the moderators. So after the debate last night, Trump went on Fox News and he said basically he felt like it was 3-on-1, as if the two moderators were in league with Kamala Harris, and then they overpowered him. I want to get your thoughts on the job of the moderators. Let me go first. If I had to grade them, I'd give them a solid B. Solid B. I thought that there were more opportunities for fact checking. In the age of Trump, he needs to be fact checked in real time. It's about our democracy and the truth, and making sure that people understand what is real and what is not. And in today's world with social media, it's so hard to tell. I thought there were instances where they were fact checking. I liked it. I thought they missed a few. But what's your take?
Well, I'll say I think they were harder on Trump than on Harris, and I was perfectly fine with that, okay? Because I'm biased. I want her to win, all right? But if I want to be totally fair about this, I do think they kind of fact-checked him, and very effectively and rightly fact-checked him about the animals, and what was the other thing? Well, the eating the pets was one, and the crime rate. The crime rate went down under Biden.
That's a big one.
And there was a third one too.
And abortion.
In fairness, they
abortion. Abortion was the third one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They didn't really do that with Harris. I mean, I think he actually has a gripe there, but
there's a reason. Yeah, I was going to say
I don't care.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that, I would say that thinking about what the rules were going in, I thought that they missed quite a few opportunities to turn the mic off. So that was one of the things that I actually noticed. And I thought that she did a really good job of following what the procedures were that had been given to her in advance. She did not come back often unless she was identified to do so. And there were too many instances where they allowed him to then come back and respond again and allowed his mic to go longer than he should have. So that was one. I actually believe that they fact checked him the way that they did, or responded to him the way that they did, because much of what he was saying just wasn't true. And so he offered them the opportunity in real time to say, no, they're not births that are happening for babies they're being killed after 9 months. No, they're not pets that are being eaten in Springfield. And so there were more opportunities for that to happen, and it should have happened in real time. I think collectively, I think they did a decent job, but I do think that there were opportunities where she really should have been given the opportunity to come back and respond to some of those things that he said, or they should have turned his microphone off like they said they were going to, and they did not do that. And so, they handled it as well as they could, but at the end of it all, there was more that could have happened in terms of that space.
I give David Muir credit in the sense of they asked a question about immigration and why Trump basically used his influence to kill the deal that Congress had been working on, and then they went to break. And I was thinking, wait a minute, you got to follow up. To their credit, when they came back, he went right back to the question, which is exactly what they should have done, because it's too serious a question. It's too crucial of an issue to just let it go without an answer. I thought that was a job well done.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I just say two things here. I think that, one, I think any Republican candidate who agrees to let, the ABC News division fact check a debate is insane. Like, I think that it's just we've had this discussion. We disagree about it. I just think a Republican candidate is insane to give a group of people who vote Democratic the ability to fact check them, because invariably they will see more problems with your speech than they will with your opponent's speech, because they live in a Democratic milieu, for lack of a better word. I also think that Trump didn't help himself. I thought there was a point in time where the moderators, right after Harris repeated the debunked fine people hoax, there was a moment when the moderator's like, well, and Trump walked over it. And so he did not give the moderator the opportunity to come in and say, well, actually, Snopes said that's not exactly how it went down. Now, there's ways to criticize Trump for the things he said, but that's the way that's been portrayed, that he called the white supremacists fine people. That's not true. Snopes has debunked it.
He said there were good people on both sides.
He said there were good people on both sides.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Again, go read the Snopes debunking. What he said and how it's been portrayed are.
I watched it live,
with one another. My point there is not to debate the fine people hoax. Everybody can do what they want. But my point is, there was a moment when the moderator after that was going to say, well, actually, maybe Snopes, blah, blah, blah. But instead, Trump rolled right over him, and he wasn't able to actually say anything. Now, maybe he wasn't going to do that, but my perception was he was interjecting. And I would have given him the opportunity to do that, because that would have been a more powerful moment for Trump to have the record straightened out by the moderator rather than him. But again, if you're a Republican candidate, if you're depending on the moderator, that's you're poorly advised. Let's put it that way.
Matt, can you give us an example or examples of when?
If I can just for a second weigh in on this, because I do think I have a measure of expertise that I can bring to bear as someone who is a member of the media and has hosted and moderated, many debates. I'll just simply say that, debates are an imperfect forum. Candidates are given a couple minutes to give answers, like another minute to maybe rebut things. When you have, individuals like Donald Trump, who's difficult to control under normal circumstances and who typically doesn't abide by decorum or rules, it's very hard to control. I'll say this, that I agree with your grade. I would give them about a B. I would say that look, the last thing that you want to be as a moderator of any debate is to have to interject yourself into it in terms of making yourself a part of the debate. But it would have been irresponsible of the moderators with some of the, clearly egregious, like, I'm not even just talking about being misleading or skirting around the edges. That's different than outright, falsities, like pants on fire falsities that it would be irresponsible as a journalist to let slide. Trump had way more of those last night than Kamala Harris. Now, that's not to say that Kamala Harris didn't omit facts or didn't, stretch the truth with some of her answers. But I think in most situations, people moderating a debate are not going to interrupt the candidate under those circumstances. But when you're just, presenting blatant mistruths, it would have been irresponsible for the moderators to not jump in there and correct that for the audience. Typically, what you see is after the debate, a lot of organizations will go back and do fact checking on the candidates, and I always encourage people to go back and do those. You don't have to rely on ABC News. There are plenty of other entities where you can go out and fact check what the candidates say. But I think it's very hard to do that in the moment when you're moderating, when you're listening, when you're trying to make sure the candidate, when you're moderating. The last thing I would say on that is how questions are formulated is very important. Knowing that people are going to be looking at and dissecting how you ask the questions. I do think that there were occasions where there were some questions that were distributed to Donald Trump that were probably worded maybe a little bit more harshly, maybe a little bit more leading than some of identical questions that challenged Vice President Harris were worded. And I think you just have to be conscious of that, even how you bring forth the questions, how you order the questions, So if that was a criticism that I had of the moderator, it might be that, just thinking about tweaking
Really?
your questions just a little bit so that you can avoid bias.
All right. All right. Mac, before you roll out, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
And
for
Kevin,
having me.
maybe you can chime in too. So what am I missing? You know, you said that a Republican candidate would be crazy to allow himself to be fact checked by a Democrat leaning platform because they live in a Democrat milieu. So what did we miss last night? What did Kamala Harris lie about that wasn't checked or caught by the moderators?
Look, I mean, what you end up having is you end up having 15 or 20 interruptions on one side and one on the other, right? And that affects the outcome. To some extent, it takes you off your game when you're forced to sort of triangulate between people. I'm just saying, as somebody who used to work with candidates, I would never advise them to go into a situation where you put people who are not going to support you and whose careers suffer if they're seen as having done anything that in any way benefits you. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. Example, Candy Crowley, who corrected Mitt Romney during the debate very famously and interrupted Mitt Romney and turned out to be dead wrong.
Yeah,
the candidates only have to worry about the other person on the other side who's a candidate.
Yeah,
and if I have to worry about being it's okay. Hey, I'm fine with a Democratic journalist asking questions. I just don't want to have to debate them. And again, what they're doing is, in my criticism, is that they live in a different media environment than Republicans do. You just do. And the things that jump out to me and the things that jump out to them are going to be very different.
Did we miss some lies last night that Kamala told that wasn't fact checked? Because then that gives credence to your argument. I can't remember any. So if you've got one candidate that's telling crazy lies.
I'm watching this about politics. I wasn't watching to fact check either of the candidates. My point is, I think I would never advise a Republican candidate to do that. But
I would just advise my candidate to tell the truth. Tell the truth. You don't have to worry about whether it's a Democrat or a candidate, a Democrat or Republican who's fact checking. Tell the truth.
Again, Mitt Romney told the truth in 2008, and he was fact checked incorrectly. That's what you subject yourself to.
But that didn't happen last night. Okay.
So Mac, here's again, I just go back,
better than you.
I just go back to what I would say is that no member of the media who's moderating these sorts of things, wants to become a part of the story. Like that's the number one thing they teach you in media is we're not to be a part of the story, and nobody relishes the opportunity to interrupt the candidate. In fact, you want the candidates to fact check each other, right? Like that's part of the goal of the debate is for the candidates to fact check each other. So for a moderator to interject, in my opinion, and as I've said this, you do have a journalistic responsibility when there are just facts or when there are just things that are presented that are just outright false. And there were 2 or 3 instances last night. And I'm not talking about misleading. I'm not talking about, hey, we look at the numbers and we interpret the numbers different, or I want to try to lead you to believe this or that or the other. That's different. Misleading or trying to spin it toward, your point of view. That's different than just an egregious, outright, provable.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
like
and if
crime was uncontrollable.
no journalist wanted to do that, we wouldn't have if no journalist wanted to do that, we'd have no problem with Fox News journalists being at the table. But we seem to, right? And so
that's a bad example, man.
Well, because, right?
Terrible example.
On one side of the aisle.
I mean, look, Fox News journalists, that network has been found,
that's an oxymoron.
Found liable, right? For knowingly, Fox's credibility.
So, listen, if there's no conservative journalists, that's a different question. I guess you guys are going to have to ask yourself why. And I'm going to have to run though because I've got something else going on. It's great.
All right, Mac. Thank you so much. Catch up with you.
See you, Mac.
See you later, Mac.
Later, guys. Great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you guys make about how it started? So at the very beginning, maybe it was just me, but it seemed like Donald Trump didn't want to shake hands, or he made a beeline for the podium. Kamala Harris made a beeline for him, and then she kind of stopped for a second, realizing he's going to the podium. So she went straight to him, offered her hand, firm handshake, said, "Hello, I'm Kamala Harris." I loved it. What was your thoughts?
Well, I think it goes along with something that Kevin said earlier, and I think I've heard it a few different times, but there is a decorum to being a professional. Even before being a professional, there's a decorum to being an adult, right? To just being polite to individuals, to recognizing people, to speaking. There is a decorum to the way that you interact. And this person just does not exhibit anything when it comes to decorum, when it comes to just being a couth adult. I mean, there is just an uncouthness that goes along with everything about the gentleman. And so when you think about that, even one of the things that I started with was that the vice president showed her ability to exhibit leadership, that she, some of the comments that you see are around maturity. We should not be referencing the persons that are trying to lead our country as immature. I mean, it's not okay. It has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with personality. It's all about character. And if you're not an adult, if you're showing pouty 3-year-old behavior, then what is there to be expected? So how can I trust anything else that you do? Because at one time you would think that your children could watch what was happening on the television when the president came on, because there was at least a recognition and a respect for the president because they were presidential. Maybe you didn't agree with their policies. Maybe you didn't agree with some of the choices that they made, but they were at least presidential. Now you really want to cover your kids' ears and their eyes when you start talking about the person that was the 45th president of the United States. Like, this person actually was the president. They were the president. And so this is what they're exhibiting at this point. So, that kind of behavior, unfortunately, to Kevin's point, that is the meter stick that we're now using. And that is something that really, it makes me sad, because that we have gotten that low that we believe that this is okay and this behavior is okay. And it's all right for him to conduct himself that way.
But I wish that Trump had. I was curious. I wish he had refused her handshake, actually, because that would have really just made him look so small.
Right.
And I'm reminded, if I may, speaking of Arnetta's comment about maturity, I'm reminded. Kevin may know Brian Tome, who's a prominent pastor of kind of a mega church here, who wrote a very powerful book, a Christ-centered kind of book. It was called The 5 Marks of a Man. And he said something in there that I always think about in regard to Trump. He goes, I've known 15-year-old men and 70-year-old boys. And I think that Trump exemplifies a 70 or whatever he is year-old boy. He is like a teenage boy and not even a mature one. And I think that I am shocked that, again, as many of you have said, why more Americans are not just totally turned off by this guy, but his just plain immaturity, I think, is so clear.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
The handshake took him by surprise. I honestly don't believe he expected, given everything that he had said, how the campaign had been going up to this point. I don't think he expected her to come out and shake his hand. I can't remember whether he and Joe Biden shook hands during the first debate. If anybody can remember that, please let us know. But I think he was stunned by the fact that she came over, and I think it says more about her than it does about him. There's a thing that we used to call statesmanship in politics, and Ironetta touched on it. It's, even if we disagree, hey, at the end of the day, we could still shake hands. We could still believe that while I disagree on some of your policies, hey, we're still Americans. We're in this battle together. Politics used to be much less adversarial and cutthroat as what we have today. And so I think he was stunned by it. And I think, it showed, continued to show again that she's the bigger person. I think will continue to be. And, again, it just shows, more of what we already knew about Donald Trump. I mean, it didn't surprise me that he didn't want to shake hands. It's who he is. And I think that's That's the great thing about, or the sad thing about where we are with Donald Trump, is there's nothing at this point that this guy can do that would be surprising to any of us.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he
Too
talks
low.
about shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue and getting away with it. I actually think if he shot somebody, we wouldn't be, we wouldn't be surprised if he did. I mean,
we're just talking about killing immigrants. Killing.
I got a question to throw out to all of you, if I may.
Sure.
I was surprised. I mean, maybe you say I shouldn't be, but it was so clear that Trump's advisors, it was reported in the media, his advisors said, please don't engage in personal attacks. You've got her on a lot of these issues, okay? So stick to the issues. And he still couldn't do it. I'm just curious what you all think about why. I mean, he's got some sense. He's a shrewd guy, not a wise man, but he's shrewd. Why was he not able to follow that simple advice?
He lacks self-control. He lacks self-control, and he's a bully. And so, just to put it mildly, that's just who he is. Time has revealed his character already. His advisors have been advising him not to make personal attacks ever since Joe Biden removed himself from running. So it is not possible for him to do it. He's even said, in the process of saying the wrong thing, they have told me not to do this, but so he lacks the self-control to be able to make this decision that would show him as an adult and not a 3-year-old.
Well, he's grown up privileged his entire life. He's always been the boss in every room he's ever been in.
There you
Everyone
go.
around him works for him. He's never been in a situation where he's had to ever listen to anybody about it.
There you go, Nathan.
Right.
There
so, this is just who he's been his entire life. But I want to ask something else here. I was struck by something else. And that is what wasn't talked about. Right. They hit some issues, but they didn't talk about the school shooting in Georgia. Right. They didn't talk about education. Ironette, I know you're an educator. I want to know what you think about that. There's a host of issues that weren't discussed. Did you guys have similar thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Of course, as an educator, you know, Nathan, that's one of the first things that I thought about, that there has not been conversation about that, and not necessarily that there would be conversation from the school shooting, but I did think that there would be some conversation around gun laws, around some kind of sensible conversation around gun laws as a follow-up to what has recently occurred. There was a school shooting in Georgia one day, and the following day, while it was not the same scenario, there was still a gun that was brought to a school as well, and there was a shooting at the school that day. And so I did expect to hear something about that, and I would have loved to hear anything about education, but I was a little taken that I didn't hear either.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that are very much the same. And again, this goes back to my conversation about debates being an imperfect platform, in that one, you try to cover as many issues as you can in a debate. You can't cover them all, and then you're trying to give the candidates a couple minutes to answer the questions. I think that, one, there needs to be more debates with fewer questions or fewer topics dealt with in the debate, so the candidates can spend more time addressing issues. Have a foreign policy debate, have an education debate, and ask a bunch of questions around the issues so that people can get a full sense of where the candidates stand, versus sort of having this buffet approach to debates. That's something within the media that there needs to be a conversation about. How can we do this better? Do this as a better public service to the people, so that we get more depth out of the candidates than what we're getting. Because the reality is the format and the way it's set up, there are a whole host of issues I'm sure that we could all bring up right now that you're not going to cover in a couple 2 or 3 hour debate. So that's the first thing. You got to look at the format and how these things are done to make sure that we can get at these important issues rather than nibbling around the edges. Second Amendment, they didn't talk about the school shooting, but they nibbled around the Second Amendment conversation with a couple of quotes here and there, but nothing of substance.
I thought Kamala had a great response when she said, I'm a gun owner.
Yeah.
So with Tim, I thought that was a great response.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
We just lost Ironetta. We just lost Ironetta again. When she comes back, we'll put her straight on. So let me lead me to the next question, and maybe our last question here, which is, and you almost already took us there a little bit, Kevin, which is, there's been a lot of conversation about whether there should be a second debate or maybe another debate. If you were advising either of the two candidates, what would you suggest? Would you suggest that Kamala agrees to another debate? Would you suggest that Donald Trump agrees to another debate? What do you think?
So I'm going to answer this in two ways. I'm going to answer this as a journalist and a member of the media and someone who believes in the public's right to know and transparency. My answer to that would be is we should do as many debates before the election as the American public needs to understand who these candidates are. That's my official answer as a citizen, as a member of the media. Now, as a realist, I'm going to say if I was Donald Trump, there's no way in hell I would do another debate. If I'm Kamala Harris, of course I want to do another debate because I've said this. Donald Trump is his own worst enemy. And the best thing that you can do as Kamala Harris is let him talk. That's why they didn't want the microphones muted. She wanted him to talk because as long as he's talking, he's losing, right? He's not gaining. He's not gaining anything because he's not disciplined enough as a candidate to stay on course and stay on task. And this is the great tragedy for our country, and that Americans really are yearning for a serious debate of the issues. But because of one of the candidates that you have, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get a serious debate on the issues. So even if there are serious issues with Kamala Harris's policy, and there may be some issues that really need to be vetted about some of her policies. But you're not going to get that under this format with Donald Trump because instead of talking about the issues, he's going to be talking about rallies and he's going to be talking about immigrants eating cats. And he's going to be talking about all of these things that have no impact on everyday Americans' lives. And it's a disservice to, I think, the American people.
Yeah. Hey, Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the whole thing about the muted microphones has been kind of a funny kind of thing because it always was, I saw it as Trump's, at least going back a couple of years, he always interrupts. He never lets you finish the question. And I think he always saw it as, oh, I like being able to, I don't like the muted microphone. And I always felt, and I'll speak kind of like Kevin would as a sort of objective kind of thing. I think muting the microphones is the right thing to do because you cannot let somebody constantly interrupt if you're going to have an organized debate. Okay. But as this was interesting, it was so interesting that leading up to this one, that she wanted them unmuted, he wanted them muted, or his advisors did. I just think it's kind of funny that she just, as one of you just, I think, Nathan, she just wanted him to go on and on and on. So I think there's that's real interesting. The second debate, yeah, he already said, Trump basically said, I don't want another debate, probably because he knows he's probably going to get his rear end beaten again. But I have to say, on the other hand, there's a risk to Harris because, I mean, she did so well in this, there's a risk that maybe she doesn't do as well in the next. So who knows? But yeah. Kevin is right. In the interest of the public, it's the more debates, the better.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. I did. I agree with Kevin that there is no way that he is going to debate her again, even though I believe that it's absolutely necessary. I don't think that there is any space that she will not do as well as, if not better, than she did in this debate. And so I just don't think he will, though.
Yeah. For me, I would recommend that if I'm advising both of them, I'm telling them both to do another debate. For Kamala Harris, obviously, I don't think that was a fluke. I don't think that was hard last night. I think she just showed up. Sis just showed up and did her. She can do that anytime. Imagine a debate, let's say it's 90 minutes, where the entire focus is on one topic. Donald Trump is 1,000 miles wide and a millimeter deep. It would be the same name calling and critiques and reliving the past over and over and over again. The guy just isn't that deep. He's not that deep. So if we had a 90-minute discussion about foreign policy, he would say the same things over and over again and be off topic. It would be a travesty. But at the same time, this was so bad. If I'm advising him, I mean, you got to get back in there, champ, and anytime you're in the ring, you gotta puncher's chance. You gotta do something. That was terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the thing with Trump is, he really has nothing to lose. Like I said, he has such a low bar that and that he could do like 10 of these debates. And again, it's not going to impact the people who support him. It's not going to change their vote. And maybe, like you said, Nathan, maybe he manages to pull off the impossible and stay on task and convince people in a moment that, what, this guy isn't that bad, because that's what he had going for him the first go around.
Yeah.
He was an anti-establishment guy. He was, publicly a guy who appeared to be, very successful. He was different. He was brash. And people were like, you know what? I think I'm going to give this guy a shot. What the hey? And I think that, there's still some of that. Obviously there's enough of that sentiment left that, basically makes this a dead heat race at this point, that he doesn't have to do much, I think, to convince, some of those people to get back on his side. But unfortunately for him, as I've written and said many times before, he is who he
is.
Let's not minimize, by the way. I mean, we can talk about the different policies and their character but let's not minimize how outstanding her preparation was. Okay. And having done a fair amount of kind of public speaking, I know what it takes. I know what it takes to do a 5-minute talk sometimes, or 10 minutes. She was so well prepared. And don't think that her expressions and her little comments here and there, they weren't spontaneous, and I don't fault her. I mean, she was so well prepared in both her presentation and her comments and her facts. So, and that is a tribute I give to her, because it shows she is someone who has real discipline and wisdom, and he obviously didn't have that discipline.
I think the one thing that I would add to that, though, is she is the more prepared candidate, period. And so, of course, she was prepared, but when you've lived the world, it gives you an opportunity to have a level of preparation, because you're speaking with facts and you know what you're talking about. She's a prosecutor. She has stood and dealt with individuals for a long time. She's had to refute lies that people tell for a long time. There are no questions about what Donald Trump is going to say or do, because he does it every time that he stands. And so, of course, she was prepared for the debate, but she also has done the work, and she is the stronger candidate in every sense of the word. And so she showed that last night, and I think that it left many individuals really proud of the fact and hopeful that we could be in a place where we go back to something that looks like the way that we want to move our country forward.
Yeah. Any last words before we roll out of here?
Yeah, well, I did want to make a mention of. So I just saw a comment in the chat that if we have a few extra minutes, then maybe we can just kind of address this, because it does kind of get to the crux. It's from John Ludd 24, where he says, "Don't minimize the average citizen's grocery bill. The aha moments will lose steam. We are out here in this economy every day." So, and I was just having a conversation with somebody about this earlier. And the very real reality of, wondering why this race is so close, and we'll reach for a lot of different things, but, there is the very real economic reality of the challenges that people face. And here's the reality is that, inflation doesn't impact everybody, the same way. I'm not saying that I'm out here ultra rich, but I am blessed enough to be in a position where, a $50 increase or a 50-cent increase in a gallon of milk is not going to make a difference in my daily lifestyle every day. I can weather those inflationary fluxes. That's not true for a lot of Americans who those types of things really impact them. And so when they look at where things are at today from the economy, it's not good. But what I will say is this, is that there are a whole lot of people, when you ask the question, are you better off 4 years ago, that can definitively answer that question, that they've never been richer. Things have never been better for them, and they're doing just fine. And a lot of those people are counting on Donald Trump getting reelected.
Right.
The folks who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, who are really hurting, those are the folks who are not, as much as they say about the benefits of Trump getting back in, that's going to help them. I mean, there are a whole lot of things that we could talk about how Trump benefited largely from the greatest, recessionary recovery under Barack Obama of all time, and how he was catching some of the tailwinds of that, especially early in his presidency, and how whoever the next president is probably going to benefit from the forward moving trade winds of how the economy is bouncing back now. Donald Trump, of course, took credit for that. Hey, okay, whatever. But his policies, and I think Kamala Harris tried to bring this forward,
right,
are not for the middle class or lower class working person. You want to talk about economic policy that's going to help people, a $6,000 child tax credit. That's going to make a difference for a lot of people who can't afford daycare and who are wondering how they're going to take care of and feed their children. What it was, a $25,000 housing down payment for people who can't afford housing or who can't
first-time home buyers.
Right. Yeah, that's going to get different, or that's going to make a difference. And guess what? Under the Biden-Harris administration, the stock market has never been higher. So guess what? The rich are going to continue to get richer. And so I think if you really want to take a look at the economy and talk about who the better candidate is, take a serious look at their policies and see who is really talking about the things that are actually going to make a difference in your life. And I think you'll find that Donald Trump talking about eliminating health care, that's not going to put more money in your pocket. That's going to cost you more. Imposing high tariffs that are going to result in, those costs being transferred over to those ultra cheap products. Let's just face it. Americans like going into Walmart and getting that 75-inch TV, $300. You can throw that out the window. You know what I'm saying? That's going to, that $300 TV is going to be like $500, $600, $700. So I'm just saying, do your homework, that on the economy.
You brought up tariffs, man, and I kind of wish during the debate that they had made Donald Trump explain what a tariff is, because I don't think he could have did it at all. I think he would have fell flat on his face trying to explain tariffs to people and how that's going to be good for us. But
he's been saying that it's going to bring money in. That he's saying it's a tax on these other countries, going to bring us more money. I mean, are you kidding? Like a first-year economics student knows that's not true.
Right. Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been fun. Our first live stream. I'm looking forward, moving forward to having conversations about whatever's hot, whether it be locally here in Cincinnati or Ohio, or on the national level, or even culturally. So looking forward to it, and glad that we can do this together.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Great time, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Absolutely. To the audience, please like and share. We'll be back really soon. Stay tuned to my Facebook page and social media. Follow everybody. Follow Phil. Follow Kevin. Follow Irenetta for more details on when you can watch the next one. Until next time, have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah, likewise.